for learned director of the Ph.D. cell of the university, respected and erudite colleague of mine, Dr. Sunita Srivastav, director of the Directorate of Research of the university, my esteemed brother, respected Dr. Zahir Qazi, learned resource persons, including a name to reckon with globally in the domain of systematic review, respected Dr. Nazli Qazi, respected Dr. Abhay Gaidhane, respected Dr. Sonali Chaudhary, learned Dean Examinations of the university, respected Priyanka Jaiswal, Director of the Examination Assessment and Evaluation, my esteemed colleague, respected Dr. Meenal Chaudhary, learned Registrar of the University, Dr. Babaji Ghevde, learned co-convener and convener of the Varda of the PhD cell of the university, respected Dr. Bhavna Lakkar, the entire organizational onus which has been so successfully over a period of time being born, and the secretary of this meet, respected Dr. Nirupma Pese, all the learned invitees and doctoral degree scholars who are here participating for this workshop on systematic review. I deem it my privilege, ladies and gentlemen, to be blessed with yet another opportunity of talking to this very illustrious and erudite congregation of the scholars who are registered and are in the process of getting their registration finalized, having been cleared through the entire set-out process, and have ventured and embarked onto the path of actualization of their scientific research work for their doctoral degree, which they richly deserve, and they are absolutely merited for the same. The theme that I've chosen to be putting across for your information, with whatever little understanding I have at my disposal and whatever little articulation I have been in a position to do on the said vital area, pertains to refutative research. I would like to recall that in my opening session and opening lecture with you in the form of a keynote address, I had given you a brief outline as to how the opinions which are operating in the society, which we collectively call them as taboos, false beliefs, unreasoned faiths, and commonly, if I want to put it in the colloquial analogy, which we call as Rudhi, Parampara, and Andhashraddha, rampant in any and every society, how they are negotiated, how they are negated, and how they are required to be done away with. It's not an easy task. It's Herculean task. And if you really ask me, scientific endeavors in terms of logicality and reasoning has always been an answer to these panacea of ills which have been dominant in the society. It's not only that this Rudi, Parampara, Andhashraddha, false taboos, beliefs, and whatnot is at the individual level. It's not an individual menace. It is deeply entrenched. And therefore, I say it stands internalized. And it is not only that, in terms of the societal operations, it is institutionalized in nature and character. And therefore, the degree of difficulty of negotiation or negation of these false taboos, beliefs, faiths, Rudi, Parampara, Andhashraddha, turns out to be the onus of scientific dimension, Pramanavadi Chintan, evidence-based connotations, credible, reproducible, demonstrable, decipherable, and intelligible. This is exactly the onus which I had tried to depict in terms of beginning from empirical research, empiricism, to evidence-based research for the purposes of negation of two important isms which are there in the society, and perhaps would continue to be there, which we call as occultism and mysticism. I am putting this prologue, and therefore, as a logical extension, I am stepping into domain 2, saying refutative research. I had demonstrated to you and put across to you that Charak had very beautifully worked that out in the frame of 5 important landmark propositions, which I would like to recall for you, wherein I had enunciated that he did talk of Anuman, he did talk of Akalan, he did talk of Anubhuti, he did talk of Anubhav, and then he said, finally, it is the Praman which ultimately is expected to be the evidence-based research. In continuation of that, what I am wanting to put across before you, ladies and gentlemen, today is what we call as negation of these unscientific, unreasoned, illogical, irrational, but deep entrenched taboos, beliefs, andhashraddha, false beliefs, how they are to be negotiated and done away with. Public health classical examples I would like to give. Why is it that in the Indian context, when the universal vaccination program of smallpox, when the world was able to eradicate, we were not. It was not just the population. Imagine the belief that Indians populace harbored was that smallpox was a Devi, and it is the wrath of that Devi that the entire manifestation occurs. It is in this context, imagine, negotiation with this particular belief which was and perhaps is harbored by the society, tackling the same for the purposes of achieving the targeted goal of human welfare through evidence-based manifestations and research is the only answer. What is exactly as a result of which the poliomyelitis vaccination, even today, we were not in a, it was very recently that we were able to get it declared by the WHO that we have become polio free. The problem was difficult because the societal deep-rooted faith which was harbored in a very heavy magnitude was that a drop of oral polio vaccine, if given to the child, will result in rendering him infertile for life. And therefore, the reluctance, therefore, the indifference. And mind well, it is not that this is harbored by individuals, harbored by families, but these are the institutionalized beliefs. And therefore, I am tempted to put across. If you look at the entire developmental proposition in the whole of Europe after, in terms of its development of thought, analogy, reasoning, logic, and dispensation, one important aspect which has to be taken note of, an important era of nearly 350 years in the European context, which we call as era of Renaissance. What is that era of Renaissance, ladies and gentlemen? What exactly that period is called? That period is called as a confrontation between science and church. Confrontation between science and religious belief. Confrontation between supremacy of scientific thoughts and religious thoughts. That is the period of Renaissance. And not only the period of Renaissance, it is the resistance and the scientific analogy which has always been given a big jolt in spite of it being evidence-based. Two classical examples I had quoted that across. What was the reason why Socrates was required to be drinking the cup of poison? What was the reason that Galileo was absolutely right in terms of his evidence, in terms of bringing out the astronomical reality that it is the sun which is static and it is the earth which moves around the sun, as against the hardened belief till that point of time that it is the earth which is the center of the universe and every other thing is going around it. The cost paid by Galileo was that he was blindfolded. Why I am putting this historicity? Refutation, therefore, is one of that modalities of research indulgence which has its own uniqueness, which has its own utility, which has its own impact and operation, because I am uttering two important statements, ladies and gentlemen, and that is, there has to be a tool handy enough, logical enough, rationalized enough, and appropriately evidenced enough to address what is classically called as erroneous ideas deeply entrenched into the society. Erroneous ideas, which classically could be because of any rhyme, reason over a period of time, which are deeply entrenched. How there has to be a tool which must be in a position to negate and navigate through the same. Similarly, what is needed, therefore, is it is not a negation or only navigation. It incorporates and aims at invocation of a conceptual change. Because there is a concept in vogue, which is deep-rooted, which is irrational, which is absolutely scientifically untenable, but it is deeply entrenched. It is blind. It is not open to reason and logic. It has been harbored over a period of time. It has become the way of their life. Perhaps it has become something which is being preached with impunity, and perhaps it is something which is being propagated with all strength, both individually as well as institutionally. Therefore, important aspect is that what you are wanting is to invoke a conceptual change. It is not just that you are wanting to be ending up into a rationalization. The conceptual orientation, the conceptual frame, the conceptual overlap, it has to be totalistic in character. Therefore, the previous concept is absolutely annihilated and is replaced by or is overshadowed and dominated by the scientifically proven, rationalized concept. And therefore, what you are contemplating out of the refutation is not just a reasonable change, not just a marginal change, not just an agreeable change, not just a negotiable change. It is a change which is totally replacing the concept by the well evidence-based, demonstrative, replicable, reproducible, acceptable, and tenable concept, which we call as evidence-based concept generated out of evidence-generating research. It is therefore, ladies and gentlemen, one important aspect that has to be taken note of is whenever you are talking of refutation as a modality, because it is aiming at a conceptual change, therefore, it will always invoke a very high degree of dissatisfaction and therefore a high degree of resistance. Why I am putting this across? I'm wanting to put this across that refutative research, which is expected to be a tool for the purposes of addressing the erroneous ideas and concepts in the society, invokes at aiming the conceptual change, but in the process, meager generation of evidence and rationalization and reasonability is only a modality. The dissatisfaction and the resistance which is going to be created and which is inevitable in nature and character, it is that which needs invocation of a concept which is reasoned out, which is evidence-based, which is absolutely explicable in its unitary manifestation, even in terms of parts and a whole, which is capable of providing an intelligible solution to the concept which was there through the replaced concept. And this is the important linkage which I'm wanting to be putting across as a huge challenge to the refutative research. The concept of refutative research, ladies and gentlemen, is not new. It has been age-old. Classically speaking, even in the philosophical discourses, if you look into, in the Darshan Shastra, in the Indian context, then refutation essays, or what is in English depiction is called as argument essays, quote unquote. Argument essays can be said to be the mother edifice of what we call as refutative research today. What an argument essay was in the context of philosophical domain. It had three important parts. Any argument essay had three important components in it, ladies and gentlemen. One was, there was an introductory introduction, which was the first opening part of an argument essay. Second, there used to be body paragraphs, which was the body of that essay. And third, it invariably had a conclusion at its end. I am wanting all of you to take note of this structure. A, introductory paragraph. B, body inclusions. And C, conclusion. These three important parts, when it was called as an argument essay. But then, if you look at what exactly the ingredients or inclusions in the argument essay were, in these three important parts, the inclusions could be categorized into four important categories. The first category was proposition of the argument itself. So the opening part is that you are proposing an argument. Now, what this argument is based on? This argument is not based on imagination. It is not based on fiction. It is an argument which is put across in the form of four important ingredients. A, it is reasoned out. So it is a reasoned out or well reasoned out argument. B, there is a data on the basis of which this reasoning has been evolved. Therefore, it includes a data analysis. Number three, this data analysis has been subjected to statistical verifiability and statistical significance. And four, therefore, it is in a position to bring out a credible evidence as a result of this exercise. So when I am saying that the argument essay has an argument, what is that argument? It's not an imagination, fiction, or a fictitious statement which is being made. It is a statement or a conclusive emphatic statement which is drawable out of A, reasons that are collegible out of data analysis, subjected to statistical validity, and therefore has ended up in invocation of a credible evidence based on which the argument is made. But then the argument essay has the second important part, which is called as a counter argument. What is that counter argument? There cannot be a refutation only by acceptance of an argument. The refutation includes argument is the proposition, but counter argument is the opposition. What is that counter argument like? Counter argument will always be an opposite side of the or opposite point of view to the argument which is being waged. And therefore, there are two things now. Argument is being put across with evidence. Four parts which I have put across, which ultimately go to conform with the research methodology. The second requirement in case of a refutation is, what is the counter argument? The counter argument absolutely is a totally 180 degrees opposite point of view. What you call as, in the modern parlance, as null hypothesis. Counter argument. That counter argument, then the third important part is, and that counter argument is also reasoned out. It is not blind in character. That reasoning out is to be given. Now, whether it is evidence-based or not, it is very difficult to say, but it could even be evidence-based. But then by and large, counter argument is an antithesis to the argument which has been waged in an argument essay. The third important part is very important, ladies and gentlemen, which is a matter of critical understanding. The third important part is called as concession. Now, what is that concession? Concession is an attempt which is worked out to make believe by demonstrating that there is some truth in counter argument. Now, the most important aspect, ladies and gentlemen, it is not that evidence-based proposition argument is resulting in surrender of the counter argument. It is submission of the counter argument. No, counter argument is an antithesis. That antithesis, the concession part is mandating that you will make all out your efforts to demonstrate that even the counter argument is credible. Counter argument is believable. Counter argument is agreeable. And there is, therefore, the requirement is you need to demonstrate that there is some realistic truth in the counter argument as well. In other words, it is germane to that philosophical thought which in the Indian Vedic ethos and the analytical ethos put in by Adi Shankaracharya was that ekam satyam vipram bahuda vadanti Truth is only one. The learned ones view it differently and describe it differently. That is the validity of counter argument. And therefore, Shastra, therefore the Shastra, the knowledge, Shastrarth, the earth of that knowledge, meaning of that knowledge, and then Shastrarth with the learned ones. This was the parampara which was there. The historical dimension of the argument and counter argument between the Adi Shankaracharya and Mandan Mish, which is the hallmark which took place in Omkareshwar on the banks of Narmada River, which by itself is a great historicity, is nothing but it is a refutative research. The entire concept of Kumbha, the entire concept of Ardha Kumbha, they were basically the places where in terms of the periodicity, in terms of argument, counter-argument, concession, refutation used to take place. Speaking for the Vedic literature, every inclusion in the form of a richa in a Vedic literature or Vedas as it is called as is refutative research in the domain of philosophy, because each richa is born out of A, argument, B, counter argument, C, shastrarth in the name of concession, and D, therefore it has refutative truth which has appeared or generated is taken as an absolute inclusion which is designated the form of a richa. And therefore the richa is that which is absolute in a rachana is called as a richa. Therefore it is finding a place of inclusion. Hence to say Vedas were written by whom? Vedas are not written by anybody. It is only Veda Vyas who has compiled the Vedas and various richas which were collaged evidence. And therefore Vedas are a manifestation, Dr. Abhay Gaidane, of a systematic review which used to take place in Ardha Kumbha and validated in Ardha Kumbha, proposition in Aryakul, and finally standardized in Purna Kumbha every 12 years. And then ultimately it got included in the collaging of the evidence, resulting in best evidence. The Richa was the best evidence in the domain of philosophy, which got a place in Vedas. Why I am telling this is, the tradition of argument essay in the Indian philosophy has been very huge and gigantic. I am not taking you to that. I am wanting to bring out in the modern parlance how exactly refutation, the tradition of refutation, the writing of the refutative essays ultimately culminated in what we call as refutative research. And therefore, from concession, the fourth important dimension in case of a refutative essay was refutation. What is refutation? Refutation is a rebuttal. If you look into any parliamentary debates, what exactly it is? Proposition, opposition, opportunity for rebuttal, and then adoption. What is this rebuttal? Rebuttal is an answer which is given by the proponent to all the points which have been raised by the counter argument, and then finally it is demonstrated that in a parliamentary bill, all the amendments moved to a proposed bill are rejected. What does it mean? That counter argument has not ended up, and therefore what is refutation? The original argument which was proposed, upon being viewed, the counter argument, and upon the counter argument being buttressed in the best possible collageable way, finally has resulted in demonstrating through rebuttal that the counter argument truth validity does not sustain, and therefore out of the rebuttal the argument which was placed before turns to be the one which needs to be adopted. Upon rebuttal, the acceptance of the argument, adoption of the argument is called as refutation. Refutation basically contemplates that nectar which emerges out of the entire manthan that has taken place, and that manthan taken place is, therefore, what is the point of commencement? Argument proposition is the point of commencement. What is the end point? Refutation is the end point. In between, what are the two operational procedures? Counter argument and concession. These are the interim procedures which ultimately result in refutation. Therefore, what I am trying to put across, ladies and gentlemen, is refutative research is that, and refutative research, mother repository of refutative research is systematic review of literature. Why I am wanting to link refutative research with systematic review of literature? There cannot be refutative because ultimately what is done in the systematic literature? There is an argument, an objective which has been put across. With that objective, the collage of the entire published research material or the published evidence is collaged. In that published evidence, what exactly it is? A, that which is buttressing the argument. B, that which is resulting in the counter argument, and D, concession which is being worked out between the two, and E, the best evidence which is in the form of upon refutation. The best evidence which is generated out of the systematic review is refutative evidence, and therefore it is out of the process of refutation, and therefore it is a piece of refutative research. Why I am putting this across with so much of my heart into it, ladies and gentlemen? When the vision document of the university, Dr. Jumani, was being made, I was insistent that we should include one important word in the vision document is, and that was refutative research. N number of people ask me, कि वे प्रकाश ये refutative क्या होता है? ये refutative क्या होता है? I thought it imperative that on earliest occasion, I would deal and dwell on the concept of refutative research, origin of refutative research, its leanings in original philosophy, and philosophy predominantly which is germane to the birth and generation of science in all parts of the world. Refutative research therefore is, ladies and gentlemen, that which is born out of a process of refutation. Refutation basically is the end result of proposition of an argument, ensuring the all counter arguments, working out the concessional analogy for buttressing of the counter argument, and finally rebuttal availed for the purposes of generating the best evidence, most credible evidence, most reliable evidence, most dependable evidence, most reproducible evidence, most translatory evidence, and most intelligible evidence. 7 criteria have been put across for the purposes of decipherance of that evidence, and therefore then it is designated as a refutative evidence. What in the end I'm wanting to clarify to you, ladies and gentlemen, it is not the certified evidence which is refutative evidence. It is that evidence which is generated through the process of refutation is the refutative evidence. It is that analogy has to be made very clear. The use and utility. I have already demonstrated to you the need of the refutative research. Society in terms of its thought process, society in terms of its concept, society in terms of its analogy, and society in terms of its cardinal beliefs, it will always need refutative research. The entire progression of the society, a barbaric man getting transformed from the point of view of barbaric days to modern civility, prudence, accommodation, affection, love, live, and let live. All this did not evolve over a period of magic wand. The transition which has taken place, ladies and gentlemen, from caveman to you and me as a modern man is a shift in the concept. And what is that cardinal shift? The shift is, for a caveman, the dictum of life was, quote, might is right, unquote. To you and me, the dictum is, quote, right is might, unquote. A 180-degree shift. We began with might is right. Today, we are in right is might domain. How exactly this shift has taken place? It's not a magical shift. It is a shift because of the refutative research. It is a shift because of the process of refutation. Na tum sahi ho, na main sahi. Tumne kahi, maine suni. Maine kahi, तुमने सुनी. दोनों की मत भिन्नता कगार पर ली. मत भिन्नताओं पर बृहत एविडेंस के साथ चर्चा की. चर्चा के दौरान खुला मंथन किया. आपको काउंटर आर्ग्यूमेंट की पूरी मुबा दी. मुझे रिबटल का पूरा अधिकार था. आर्ग्यूमेंट मेरा था, काउंटर आर्ग्यूमेंट आपका था, कंसेशन आपका दायरा था, रिबटल मेरा दायरा था. मंथन के बाद में जो नेक्टर निकला वो किसी मोहिनी के पास नहीं, किसी देवी देवता और दानों के पास नहीं, वो मानव कल्याण के लिए मानव के हाथों में आकर मानव के उत्थान और उन्नयन का जो स्वर हमें और आपको दिख पड़ता है, that is exactly a result of refutation which in the domain of research, in the context of research analogy and methodology, has been designated as refutative research, the mother repository of which is refutation essay in literature and Shastrartha Parampara in the Vedic ethos of the Indian civilization. Ladies and gentlemen, there are n number of contours to the refutative research which can be taken up for discussion. My purpose was to introduce the concept of refutative research in terms of its origin, in terms of its need, and concluding utility. As I said, conceptual change and evolution of the intellectual evolution of the society, rationalization of the societal behavior, rationalization of the thought process, evidence-based thinking process inculcation, making a man look different from animal by virtue of rationalization has been the hallmark of refutative research. Therefore, utility of refutative research is not just development of the society. It is classically said by Bertrand Russell, but for refutation, man still would have been in the caves, to be designated as a caveman, but for the progress of refutation, that he is onto the path of being plagued by prudence to be an egalitarian man. Transition of caveman to an egalitarian man, transition of the barbaric society to an egalitarian society, the only way is refutation, and the evidence generation thereto is refutative research. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for patient listening. That's from my side.
Thank you, sir, for your enlightening words. We all came to know about a new dimension about the refutative research, its origin, need, and utility through your speech.